All right. Miriam, was there anything you wanted to say to everyone before I get started, or would you like me to just jump in?
No, just to thank everyone for their time today, and especially my thanks to Bernadette and Aminata for providing this training specifically for the TAAF program. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that everybody can see the presentation. Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and walk through some things to get us all kind of situated in terms of the history of everything and what we're doing in terms of GPRA reporting now, and then we can go into some demos and I can show you the website just to make sure that everybody's aware of where all the resources are. So to get started, I'm just encouraged by everyone's participation here, so thank you for being here. I'm hoping that this is helpful information and that you find this informative and just gives you an opportunity to prepare for your first reporting. So I'm just going to jump right in. So in this presentation, we will introduce the new instruments and metrics for EDA's non-infrastructure programs by first talking about the context of our traditional performance measurement practices at EDA, and which includes the forms that just expired on November 30th of this year, which is what we are replacing with our new process. We'll then talk about the new instruments a little bit. We'll touch on the research and the motivation behind the new GPRA instruments for these non-infrastructure programs at EDA, including TAAF, and the data that we collect. Oh, somebody needs to be muted. I'm just going to mute all. Okay, back at it. All right, finally, we will tell you what you can expect in the short term from the implementation of the new data collection instruments and the processes at EDA. All right, so EDA collects and reports on performance measures in compliance with the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993, which was amended in 2010. And this sets forth the requirements for all agencies to collect, analyze, and report on their performance. EDA accomplishes this by two separate goals. We have our EDA Performance Goal 1, which is more focused on our construction projects at EDA. This is the physical infrastructure investments that promote private enterprise and job creation in economically distressed communities and regions. So this falls more so in grantees of our public works and economic adjustment assistance projects, as well as our revolving loan fund projects under this goal. EDA Performance Goal 2 focuses on our non-infrastructure investments that build community capacity and sustain regional competitiveness and economic growth. So in this presentation, we're going to address the redesign of the system to meet EDA's Performance Goal 2. So prior to November 30th, EDA has collected our performance data using the ED 915, 916, 917, and 918 forms. And I know that you're all familiar with the ED 918 as it used to be, but now we will be transitioning away from this, or we have transitioned away from this process where we no longer have these forms. The ED 915 is still in place for our existing RLFs, but the rest of the forms have all been replaced. So they have been removed from the website. So that means that you're no longer going to be reporting on those forms, and even the cadence of your reporting is now changing. So whereas there used to be this 3, 6, and 9-year cadence, that is now being replaced. And we'll go through all of that in more detail. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of the data that you're reporting on, just so that you know it doesn't just sit on a shelf. It's used in a variety of ways. The data that are collected under GPRA are reported via departmental publications and are reviewed by key stakeholders such as OMB, Government Accountability Office, and Congress. Among other uses, EDA's data are really tied to our annual budget requests and appropriations. So it's extremely important that we're getting quality data. It's also essential for telling your story and showing the impact of EDA's investments. So we aren't just collecting data to have it, we honestly use it, and it's important to us that we're able to get high quality data from our grantees, which is why we've moved in this direction. There's also federal requirements that necessitate EDA having better data. For example, the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018 requires all agencies to submit an annual plan to OMB and Congress identifying, among other things, data the agency intends to collect, use, or acquire to facilitate the use of evidence in policymaking. So it's important that we have data to support that. Okay, so what are the key differences between the expired forms and the new instruments? The expired forms, they were program focused, so very specific to the type of program. They only covered 3 programs: partnership planning, university centers, and the trade adjustment assistance for firms programs. So they were also narrow in scope. They're very select outputs and outcomes. They were PDF based, and they were annual data collection. The new process applies to all of EDA's non-infrastructure programs to accommodate a variety of projects and intended outcomes. So we're able to capture a wider breadth of data with the new process. It's also based on years of novel research by leading research institutions in EDA. And we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute. These are web-based instruments using Qualtrics. So this allows for flexibility and easier record keeping. And again, I just want to emphasize that this is web-based. So you will get we'll talk about the process shortly, but you will get a link to an electronic website where you can enter all of your information in the questionnaires, and then it'll be submitted. There's no place for you to go and do this on your own separately. You will be prompted through a link to a web-based Qualtrics instrument. The data collection is going to be semi-annual and annual. So it's semi-annual during the period of performance only. This is capturing your actual program activities or your outputs. The annual questionnaire will be for a period of 5 years, regardless of your period of performance. It'll be for a period of 5 years annually and is meant to capture outcomes of the activities that you're doing. So this is a little bit about the kind of the background of how we got to where we're at. So the revised instruments are grounded in years of cooperative research between EDA and leading research institutions, including SRI International and UNC Chapel Hill. This data is available on our website, so you are welcome to read the reports and get a better understanding of all of the research that was done and the background of what we're talking about now. But this is just a flag for you that this has been an ongoing process for a number of years. One of the results of this research was the economic development logic model. So from left to right on your screen, the logic model tracks the initial or baseline conditions and capacities of a region where an applicant organization operates or of the region it serves. Then we've got inputs such as government funding, and then outputs or the program activities that I was just mentioning. So that includes the facilities and equipment, events, networking, referrals, and so on. Then we have capacity outcomes. So these are intended to monitor a wide range of intermediate effects of the outputs or the activities conducted under the scope of work for that particular award. And then finally, we have the realized outcomes. These are the longer term economic development outcomes. And just to flag for you here that this list, the list for actually the initial baseline conditions and the realized outcomes are not intended to be exhaustive, and they actually should evolve in light of various economic events. In this presentation, we're really focusing on the program outputs and the capacity outcomes. These are the data that we'll be collecting directly from grantees and the new instruments that we have been referring to. So on this slide, you can see the type of information that we'll be collecting on the semi-annual questionnaire. So the new 916 is the semi-annual questionnaire focused on outputs or activities under your award. I know this is a lot of information. This is all available on our website, so I'm not expecting you to digest any of it right now. Really, I just want to point out that all of this information is available ahead of time so you can get a sense of what kind of data you should be collecting throughout your award. So the new ED 916 is organized into the same categories of outputs or program activities as the logic model that we just went over. We don't expect that every single category of outputs will apply to your project. So when you are responding to the instrument, you'll be able to select only the categories and questions that apply to your specific scope of work, and you'll be able to bypass the inapplicable ones. So as we mentioned before, it's a very flexible tool. You can go through the survey very easily, skipping over the entire categories that aren't relevant to you, to your scope of work, and also skipping questions within categories that aren't applicable. We'll do a demo in a few minutes so you can get a sense of what that actually looks like. But just to let you know now, there is a lot of information on this slide, but it's only intended for informational purposes right now. You'll get a sense later when you go through all of the questions, which questions you are responsible for responding to. So again, here, the logic that's embedded in the instruments will make many of these questions invisible to you. So you'll be able to skip through those fairly easily. You will be expected to respond to the applicable questions on program outputs in a cumulative way. So semi-annually during the duration of your period of performance, you'll be responding cumulatively. And all of those instructions are going to be very clear in the questionnaire once you receive it. If under your grant scope of work, your organization serves clients or beneficiaries directly, you will receive the annual ED 917 questionnaire. So again, this instrument is organized into categories of questions with the flexibility to bypass any categories that aren't relevant. The instrument is split into two main sections. The first one is more focused on the traditional or longer term outcomes, such as job creation and retention, private investment leverage, and operating revenue changes. In this section, you will have the option to click non-applicable or select an option that states that the outcomes are intended and expected, you just don't know them at the time you're responding to the questionnaire. The second section covers a broader set of capacity outcomes. This will allow our grantees to report on important milestones and intended outcomes that are more specific to your grant and that we haven't been able to capture before, such as new product introduction, expansion of business networks, and new financing and human capital improvements. We also have the 918, so the only difference between the ED 917 and the ED 918 really is they're both the annual outcomes questionnaire. However, you won't be responding to both. You'll only be responding to one questionnaire depending on if you're serving clients or not. So the ED 918 is structured the same way. So I'm just going to keep moving through for brevity's sake. So a few points are important to keep in mind as you prepare to begin reporting through the new instruments. Not all categories of questions will apply to your scope of work. So this is very focused on your scope of work. So if you have one EDA award, you will be responding to 2 semi-annual and 1 annual for that specific award, and you'll only be responding to the questions that are relevant to you. And you are making that decision as you go through because you know what your scope of work is. So there are a number of opportunities to bypass inapplicable questions or select NA. There's There are some pieces of logic in there to force you to respond to a couple of the questions that are required, but again, the tool will tell you when that happens. You can access the questionnaires on our website ahead of time so that you can see in PDF form what you should expect. So we'll go through that in a minute. If you have any questions at any time, you can email programevaluation@eda.gov. That is a special inbox that has been set up so that you can communicate directly with our data team on any questions you have about the questionnaires themselves or the data that you should be collecting. The last section of the questionnaires contains an optional geographic information and narrative section. So that's where you would submit a success story or any other information that you wanted to share with us that you haven't been able to capture as well in the questions that were in the questionnaire. And all outcomes that you report on should be attributable to the scope of work under the particular grant that you're responding for. And you can save your responses and return to the questionnaires later. So you don't have to do this all in one sitting. When you receive the questionnaire via a link, you'll be able to keep going back to the questionnaire over a period of 1 month, and then you'll be required to submit after that month. And you'll get reminders from Qualtrics when your time is up, but we would just encourage you to try to capture as much of the data as you can so you can just sit down and do it. It really doesn't take very long. We've done a number of test runs on this. We had a pilot study done for it, and it really doesn't seem to be too time consuming as long as you're able to capture the data ahead of time. But again, if you still need to collect more data and you're not able to complete everything in one sitting, you can just exit out and then return to it later to complete the questionnaire when you're ready. And after you've submitted the questionnaire, there's an option to download your responses so you can keep track of your data on your own after that. Okay, so what's next? So unless directed otherwise by your EDA program officer, if you've received a grant on or after June 1st and the period of performance started on or after June 1st, you will receive your first semi-annual questionnaire sometime after early December. So it's semi-annual. So for example, if your period of performance started on June 1st specifically, you should have received your first questionnaire sometime in early December. And so the next round, for those who received their award sometime in July, will receive a questionnaire sometime in January, and so on and so forth for the semi-annual. And our data team will be working to schedule those and send those out. So I would recommend that you just be prepared for that ahead of time, to be looking in your email. The emails will be sent to whoever the main point of contact is for each grantee organization. So that's something you would work with your EDA program officer on to make sure that the right person in your organization is receiving the questionnaire itself, because only one person can complete it and submit it. So just another reminder, the semi-annual is distributed only during the period of performance, and the annual is for a period of 5 years. So now that I've gone through that, let's go to the website to make sure everybody's had a chance to see that. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute. Okay, while I'm transitioning, does anyone have any questions right now?
Hi.
Yeah.
Bernadette Scott Jacob.
Hi.
Hi. I think we will cover this, but I'm not clear about the annual 5-year period.
So as far as when it starts or what's expected?
When it starts.
So it'll start 1 year, exactly. It'll start roughly 1 year after the start of your award, and then it will happen for a period of 5 years.
Understood.
Okay. Okay, so on our website, we have a lot of information about the background and the cadence of this. So again, this outlines that this is an entirely web-based process. The links to the questionnaires will be distributed electronically to grant recipients according to this schedule. The ED 916, as we've discussed, is every 6 months during the period of performance, and it's based on the award's start date. And the ED 917 and 918, depending on which one you're getting, that will be a period of 5 years based on award start date and distributed annually. Okay, so now we're getting to the good stuff, the things that I wanted to show you that I've been mentioning. So we have PDF versions of the questionnaires themselves. This is intended for you to familiarize yourselves with each of the questions ahead of time. That way you're prepared for when you actually get the questionnaire. So the ED 916, you can open that up in PDF form and walk through everything that you will see when you receive the questionnaire directly. So this is not something that you can fill out and submit ahead of time. This is something that you can just look through and mark for yourself what questions are relevant to you. So the first thing you would do is enter your EDA grant number and mark what your targeted beneficiary or client of your grant is. And if this is specifically for capital challenge grantees, there's a separate set of questions for them. So that's why we have noted that there. So just going to skip through that. Okay, so this is organized into categories of the activities or outputs. As we discussed before, we've got facilities and equipment, events, networking and referrals, R&D and commercialization support, financing support, and et cetera. So under facilities and equipment, every category is structured the same on the first page. So there's the question of, did this grant support that particular category? There's a definition of what that is. And just a reminder that anything that's being reported should pertain to the activities under the EDA grant or cooperative agreement. So then you can just go through and get a sense of what all these questions are. There's definitely some guidance available for how you should respond, especially when we're entering in numbers. So events, networking, and referrals, same idea. Okay, research and development. On the actual questionnaire, we've made a couple of updates. So when you get the updates, when you get the questionnaire, you'll see the category flags that this may be applicable to TAAF grantees. There are a couple of questions that are specifically relevant to grantees in the TAAF program. So just wanted to flag that for you. And then we've got one under the financing support as well. So that's just an example of the ED 916, and you can go through and see the same, exactly what I was just showing you for the ED 917 and the 918 to get a sense of what those questions are ahead of time. We also recommend that you have this information available when you're completing the questionnaire. There are a couple of questions that request specific NAICS codes, as well as the census tract numbers. So the census tract numbers is important just for us to be able to capture location-specific information. In a world where there's more data requests for location data, it's really hard for us to be able to track this exact location of all of EDA's investments if we don't have census tract numbers. So we're trying to capture this as early as possible and then throughout the award as applicable. So those are just a couple of things that makes your life easier if you have that available to you before you start completing the questionnaire. Also on this website, you'll see recorded webinars, which we are continuously adding to. This webinar will be posted here so that you can refer to it later. We just did another webinar with EDDs through NATO, and that will also be posted here. We've got demo videos by grantee type. So we've got build to scale, economic adjustment assistance, partnership planning, revolving loan fund, university center, and we're working on others. So we will most likely have one for all of you as well, so that you can get a sense of what it looks like to complete the ED 916 on a live questionnaire. So those are helpful demos. We will be having one for you guys. We just haven't been able to get that up yet. There's some reminders. A lot of this I've already covered, but we just want to be as forthcoming as possible, letting you know that you can skip through inapplicable questions, you can track your data, and also the program evaluation at eda.gov email inbox is there for you to ask any questions you have. So that's the website. I'm going to pause again and ask if there's any other questions that folks have before I do a brief demo.
Hi, this is Donna with the Mid-America TAAF.
Hi.
How are you today?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good, thank you. In the past, so TAAF program recipients, we always filled out the ED 918 annually. So going forward, we're going to fill out the ED 916 semi-annually, and I'm assuming that it will be the 918 again. You said we'll either be doing the 17 or 18 annually. If in the past it was the 918, should we assume it will be the 918 again for us?
No, so the difference between the 917 and the 918 now is if you're serving clients directly or not. So Miriam, can you speak to this for all of your grantees in terms of which one they might be responding to? Okay, so so if under your EDA grant, the purpose of your award is in response to specific entities that you're serving, then that would mean you're serving clients. So if there's a targeted outreach or targeted client relationship, you would be serving clients, and in that case, you would be responding to the ED 917.
Yeah. And Bernadette, I think the assumption was that TAAF grantees would be serving clients, so they would be filling out the ED 917.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that reminder. I couldn't remember if we'd still settled on that one.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Any other questions?
I have one. This is Tom Smolzak at Midwest TAC. How are you doing?
Doing great.
So one of my guys chimed in during the call here that there's a little bit of a nebulous difference between in the survey questions, whether it's applied specifically to our clients in the semi-annual 916 or to us. Is there questions that reply that are responding to both of those situations, or is this exclusively to the clients that we serve?
Bernadette. Yeah, so the 916 is just looking to see what outputs the activities that you're carrying out because of the EDA grant. We want to know what those outputs for those activities are, right? The 917 is looking to capture how you've been able to improve the capacity for your clients that you're serving because of the activities that you carried out that was sponsored under the EDA grant. Does that make sense?
So the 16 is more in relation to the activities of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Centers using the award, and the 17 is specific to our clients.
Yes, so whatever outcomes you were able to achieve because of the activities. So the activities could be, in relation to your clients as well, whatever those activities and the outputs from those activities are, and how those influence the outcomes that you derive from your clients.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good distinction on that.
Yeah, so if you have any questions as you're going through it, feel free to reach out. I mean, it's always better to get clarity on that. So for example, with this particular question under the R&D and commercialization support, this is in the ED 916. So for TAAF grantees, how many firms served had projects in their business recovery plans that were for the purpose of conducting research and development activities? So you're really just responding to the number of firms that were served here. So this is from your perspective. So yeah, in many of these cases, this is going to be activities that you have conducted.
Okay, and then a quick second question.
Yep.
On the census tract data, we've never tracked our information, our client outputs or anything like that by census tract. Is there a simple website at the Census Bureau to plug in a zip code and trade it into a census tract so we can start adding that data now?
Yeah, so we provide a link on the questionnaire, but that link is a bit complex. So what we would advise is to just basically what we do when we need to find a census tract, we just put it in on Google, and that spits out something to us. But we do provide a link on the questionnaire. So if you maybe want to take a look at that and see how you can figure that out, perhaps it could work for you. But what we just do is a simple Google search on our end.
You might also be able to find a census tract if you're really not sure and you can't figure it out through Google. You might be able to find it from the Stats America Opportunity Zones tool. There's a lot of data in that, beyond the Opportunity Zone information. So all of the data is based on census tract. So if you type in any kind of geography, you should be able to identify the census tract that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to jump into a brief demo, and hopefully you guys will be able to come up with some other questions while I'm doing this, or as we go through. Feel free to interrupt. Okay, so the ED 916, when you receive the link and you click on the link, you'll be directed to something that looks very much like this. So there's a basic intro statement, just all of this information we've already discussed. These are the categories of questions and a reminder about being able to skip through the ones that are irrelevant to you, and then the email address to contact if you have any questions. So
hi, this is Carrie Schoenig from the Great Lakes TAG. You mentioned that it's semi-annual, every 6 months. Which months, what month or is it due?
So it's based on the start of your award. So okay. You don't have to calculate it, but that's how we calculate it.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep. All right, so you enter your award, and then you enter your target beneficiary. No. All right, so now we get to the categories of outputs. So because I know that I'm a TAAF grantee, and there's a couple of questions that under R&D and commercialization support that are relevant to my scope of work, I'm just going to go straight to that category. So when you get to this category, as I said, there's an intro statement, and we also have a flag here. Among other EDA programs, this category may also specifically apply to the TAAF program. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, this applies to me. Okay, so now we're answering the questions under this. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got all of the categories that are within this questionnaire, and there's a progress percentage so that you know how far within that particular category you are. Okay, so I clicked NA for the first one, and then for this one, I tried to skip through and I couldn't because I actually have to answer this question, but I can easily just select NA. I'm not as familiar with the TAAF program, so I apologize if some of my responses are are incorrect, but I'm just going through to show you how you could fill this out. Okay. 5 for that one, and 4 for that one. And I have completed that category. So now I'm in the financing support section. And again, here, this category may also apply to RLF, build to scale, and TAAF programs. Okay, I've completed that. So let's assume that I've already gone through all of the questions on the PDF form, so I know with 100% certainty that there are no questions within these other categories that are relevant to my scope of work. And I would just like to go ahead and complete this questionnaire because I'm done with it and there's nothing else I need to complete. I did that wrong. I apologize. I'm just going to skip through that question.
Yeah.
You can just easily select no and go through the categories. So after you've finished that, we've got our geography and tools section, and this is where the census tract numbers come into play. So if the information is available, we would really like to have information about where these reported outputs are at the county level, census tract level, or tribal area level. So you would just fill that in this text field here. Because I don't have it, I'm just going to select NA because I don't know where you're doing work. So for now, we'll do that. But here's another question about the tools that you've used. We're interested in what tools you're using, even if it's not these ones. If there's another tool that you're using to plan or assess the progress of your project, we would love to know about that. And you can enter the name of that tool here. If you aren't familiar with any of these tools, these are all hyperlinked, so you can access those tools for your own information. Otherwise, if you know that you've used one, you can just go ahead and select that and move forward. All right, so now we're at the narrative section. This, as I said earlier, this is for you to report on any other progress or a success story that you have related to that grant. And this is entirely optional, so you do not have to complete that. Now, if you knew that you needed to go back and enter in some more information, that there was just data that you didn't have, but that you could get, you just weren't able to collect it right now. And so maybe in a week you think that you'll be able to get this information. You can go ahead and just X out of this and then come back to the questionnaire later and complete it before you hit submit. Once you hit submit, it's submitted. You can't go back and change it, but you're definitely able to X out and go back to it to complete the questionnaire at a later time. And it's really easy to skip through. This tool is very flexible, as we've been saying. So that's the tool. Are there any questions that people have on the ED 916 and the process of the electronic questionnaire?
Bernadette, there's a question in the chat box that asks whether someone at EDA is going to tell them exactly what questions they're supposed to answer.
No, so this is, as we said, this is based on your scope of work, and so you should be responding to whatever questions are relevant to the work that you're doing. This is not something that we don't have a checklist on the back end and comparing your scope of work to the questions you responded to. We're not validating in that type of way. So this is something that you would make a decision on. And if you have questions about if a specific question is relevant, you're welcome to talk through with your EDA program officer or ask questions about, I'm not sure exactly what this question is getting at, but this is the work I'm doing. Is that relevant? Those questions are absolutely welcome, and we can help you with that. But it's not something that we're going to prescribe ahead of time.
And if you're noticing that, well, while we've added a couple, we have a lot of questions on the questionnaire. Obviously, not all of them are going to apply to you. But if you're noticing that there are outputs and outcomes that you know of and you know about that are not being captured in the questionnaire, we're always open to feedback. This is not set in stone per se. Like, we have a chance to add more questions and remove questions in, I think, 3 years, Bernadette.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a chance to make this a better process that's more that includes a lot more activities and perhaps other outcomes that we may not be capturing right now, although this is a pretty extensive questionnaire. So if those things come up as you're filling this out, you're thinking, oh, well, you know, we're doing this, or we're seeing these types of outcomes, but they're not being captured, please feel free to reach us at programevaluation@eda.gov, and we'll make note of that as well.
Great. So maybe this will trigger some more questions, but I just wanted to run through the ED 917 briefly with you. So this is the annual questionnaire focused on the outcomes of your scope of work. So this is where NAICS codes are requested, but because I don't have that, I'm going to select NA. Oh, and I need to, there we go. Okay, so the first section, as I said, is our more traditional data points. So we have to complete that section first. Okay. So now we get to section 2. These are all of the capacity outcomes. So I'm just going to start with the first category. And I'm just going to skip through a couple. I apologize. I am not as familiar with the TAAF program to know which category might be relevant. So if I'm just going to say no and go to, I'm just going to say yes to this one and we'll go through it. Okay. Yeah, so in reference to the question that was asked earlier, this one is, so what was the number of loans, grants, or contracts obtained by your clients or borrowers as a result of the assistance under the EDA grant? So this is information that you would need to obtain from your client in order to be able to answer these questions. Whereas the other questionnaire we just went through, the semi-annual, is information that is more focused on your activities, so you would have that. And again, this is the ED 917, it's client focused. In order to respond to the questions, you would have to reach out to your clients theoretically or have already captured that information.
I mean, and I think, you know, we would recommend that you're keeping track of this information so that when it's time to respond to this questionnaire, you have that information on hand already and you can go through the questionnaires with relative ease, I think.
And then we have two sections here on organizational capacity. The first one, the first category is focused on kind of the developing, updating, implementing a SEDS or non-SEDS economic development plan, or conducting feasibility studies, securing funding from other sources, very much focused on these, institutional capacity building long-term strategies for regional resilience. And the second one is very much tailored to the SEDS itself. So if you responded to yes for that initial category, it would direct you to that second category with more detailed questions about the SEDS itself. So that's why I just wanted to skip through that. And then we get to the geography and tools section, which we've already gone through in the other one. So I'm not going to touch on this anymore. We've already covered it. And the narrative section, this is the same as the other one. We're just requesting that information if you have it. And if you have links to annual reports where you may use some of this data, we would love to have access to that as well. Okay, so that's the ED 917. I know that was really quick. There's, I think your best bet is to spend some time on our website looking through the PDFs so that you know which questions are relevant to you. But as we stated before, the semi-annual and the annual questionnaires are based on the start of your award. So 6 months after the start of your award, you should be expecting to receive this ED 916 via a Qualtrics link, and the ED 917 you should plan for about a year after the start of your award. Are there any questions at this time?
And Bernadette, I just wanted to say, we are in communication with your with regional staff, and we'll communicate to them, 2 weeks before we send out the questionnaire. So you're not just going to see a link to the questionnaire in your inbox. You will ideally get, some heads up from your project officer to let you know that you should be expecting this in about a week or so.
And I mentioned earlier all of the research and the reports that were done to lead up to all of this. On our standard eda.gov/performance page, this is where we have a lot of that background data and really the crucial information that supports the work of these questionnaires. So if you're interested in any of the data, you're interested in the report, you can read the full SRI International report here, as well as you can get access to other research reports and tools that have been developed through EDA funding. You can see we have other reports that are housed here as well. We're trying to build out the site to be a little bit more cohesive across EDA. So this is where we've got a lot of our key information and definitions as well. So if you are curious about what exactly all of our definitions are, especially when you go to complete the questionnaires, you can get a little bit more information there. But the GPRA page that we were on for most of this presentation is eda.gov/performance/GPRA. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for participating in this. I know it's a lot to digest, so hopefully you'll have some time to take a look at all the resources, and feel free to reach out with any questions you have, because if you have them, I'm sure somebody else does, and we really want to make sure that we're capturing all of these questions for the benefit of other grantees as well. So we'll be having an FAQ document posted on our website. We're just working on collecting a few more questions that have been asked through other webinars. So please send any questions along if you haven't asked them already. But we thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing the data that we're collecting.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.